It is Sunday, November 17th. It is, I think, probably close to 10:30, maybe almost 11 o'clock. I'm not quite sure. I haven't checked the time in a little bit, but I just finished recording my coffee and ketchup video today. And I haven't really been able to read much this week because unfortunately things have just kind of been crazy. This entire week has been another week where I come home and I'm really exhausted and I don't really want to do anything. And then yesterday on Saturday, I had planned to do a lot of reading, but I ended up actually going out with Robert and having a really nice day. For the first time in like a while, we actually are starting to be able to have weekends together now because his work schedule's changed where he's working nights over the course of the week as opposed to the weekends. So Saturday was the first day that we actually got to do stuff during the day of Saturday together in a very long time. So we went out to breakfast, we did some shopping, and then we came back here and we deep cleaned our apartment basically. And then I sat and played The Sims 4 for about 5 hours because I had bought Discover University while I was out. And so I got that set up on my computer and I was playing that for like 5 hours trying to like figure out what I found was to be the best way to like get a sim to maintaining an A+ GPA with The Sims 4, and I found a way to do it, and I kind of explained that in my coffee and ketchup video, so if you want to go check that out, feel free to. By the time this video goes out, that will have already gone out. But today I will say I am a chapter into Carpe Corpus. I've basically been on chapter 2 like all week, but I haven't really felt like I read enough to really make it so that I counted the pages toward any particular day. So I think I'm going to try to crank this out today. And then around noon, Robert and I are going to be going out to do laundry and go get groceries. So if I don't finish Carpe Corpus while I'm here, I definitely will probably get at least close to finishing it, if not completely finishing it, while we are at the laundromat today. And then if I don't finish it while I'm at the laundromat today, I definitely will finish it this evening. But the one chapter I have read so far is okay. It's not fantastic. I mean, it's the first chapter, so there's not really a lot that's gone on. The most that's really happened is that in the beginning of Carpe Corpus, it is Claire's 17th birthday, and it is riding on the coattails of essentially what happened in Lord of Misrule, where Bishop has basically taken over the entirety of Morganville, and he has thrown Shane into jail for his past crimes of trying to kill off vampires with his father, and the fact that he's incredibly violent as it is. So he's been thrown in jail and is being threatened with death unless Claire essentially bids to Bishop's will. So that's kind of a huge, huge thing. And Claire's trying to figure out exactly what to do with that. So she's still trying to adhere to what Emile wanted her to do, which was try to help find a cure for the vampires who are still very sick. In the last book, they found out what actually is a cure for this sickness, and I don't want to say what it is because it'll spoil it. But she and Myrnin found out in Lord of Misrule something that actually can cure the vampires of this sickness that they are dealing with. But now she has to figure out exactly how to go from there because getting that cure is not the easiest thing to do. So really all that happened in the first chapter was that Claire and her parents had cake for her with her 17th birthday. They gave her presents and everything, and she kind of had to, you know, really put her foot down with her parents and say like, I have to go out and do these things, and whether you like it or not doesn't concern me. This is something I have to do to protect the people I love. And so that was really a big moment for her, I think, because Claire has always like been very dutiful to her parents. They're very much helicopter parents. Like they don't like anything negative to happen to their child. Like I think at one point Claire's father in one of the other books discusses the fact how sheltered she is, and they don't want her living with a bunch of 18-year-old kids who could possibly take advantage of her. But here's the thing is that your daughter is smart enough to go to MIT or Caltech. I think she knows whether or not, you know, someone is gonna take advantage of her. Like she's not stupid. Like she might be young, but she's not stupid. And at this point, Claire being at 16 and having moved out of her parents' house to go to college, I think she's able to make decisions for herself. And you can see throughout the book that she's not really that naive. Like she's actually pretty smart given, you know, the circumstances. But she just doesn't know much about Morganville, and so she has to kind of learn that as she goes. But she's not stupid. She doesn't make dumb decisions, really. And the decisions she does make may seem dumb, but in reality, they're actually kind of, you know, they're what she feels like she needs to do to protect the people she cares about. So you can't really fault her for it. The fact that she really stands up to her parents for the first time in this chapter and in this book is a really big moment for her, because I think that she was so hesitant to do so because of the way that her parents would react. I think that with everything though that she's been through for the last year, she deserves to be able to do things that she decides that she needs to do. There are more important things at stake than just sitting around and waiting for something to happen. So I really think that that's a big step. So that's a really good point to have made within the first chapter of this book specifically, especially with her turning 17, which is a really prominent age for a lot of people. I mean, the most exciting thing that I got to do when I turned 17 was I was like, oh, I can go watch R-rated movies and buy R-rated games now. I don't know, like I'm excited to see how Claire continues on this path of really standing up for herself, because I feel like she's pretty much stood up for herself in a lot of ways throughout this series. Like, she's done really well for herself considering the situation she's in, but in terms of really doing things, I think, for herself, like, because she thinks that it's right, I'm excited to see her do more of that. I really hope that Carpe Corpus ends up becoming a lot, better, because Lord of Misrule was kind of a letdown for me in a lot of ways. I ended up giving it, I think, like a 3-star or so, and I think I missaid it in like my wrap-up that I gave it a 4-star, because I looked back at my Goodreads and I saw that I gave it a 3-star. So I hope that Carpe Corpus kind of goes back on an upswing, because there's some stuff that's going to hopefully happen here. Hi guys, so I know same spot as last time. I'm going to try to keep the spots of where I filmed this vlog kind of like everywhere in different places. But so I decided that I'm going to take Sunday and add it to this week's vlog, because I really want to actually have a better vlog and actually make it like a full week kind of thing. So I've decided I'm going to go Sunday to Sunday with this vlog with reading the Morganville Vampires. So last night I did end up actually finishing Carpe Corpus. It was like 11 o'clock at night by the time I finished it, and I was really tired and didn't want to record. And then I got home today and I was kind of feeling crappy, so I kind of sat on the couch and just chilled out for a little bit, and Robert is finishing up dinner, so I figured I would actually just record for a second. But Carpe Corpus was actually pretty good. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. The one thing that is a huge difference between this book and the other books that are in the series up to this point is, for one, the chapter lengths. Most of the books in this series tend to have anywhere between 12 to 13 chapters, sometimes 14. This book had 10 chapters, and especially the last 5 or 6 chapters were much longer than were normal. So go into that with that mindset, because it is a short book still, but the chapter lengths, for some reason, for me, with any book, is very important, because it tends to affect the way that I read the story. Particularly, I prefer shorter chapters because I feel like I get through the book a lot faster, and longer chapters a lot of times can sometimes get really bogged down with a lot of information, or there might be scenes that are very dragging, and so that can really affect the way that I read a story. However, one thing that I really liked with Carpe Corpus is that the longer chapters actually had significant purposes for those, because many of the scenes that were involved in each individual chapter were really substantial. There were really good action parts. There were really good parts where we understood a lot of information within a short amount of time, but it wasn't overwhelming kind of thing. In Carpe Corpus, essentially what we see is that Claire has essentially become a minion of Bishop against her will, because Mr. Bishop has essentially taken over Morganville after the events of Lord of Misrule, and Shane is in jail and is possibly going to be executed for the fact that he was a part of a anti-vampire gang with his father. Michael is now also under the influence of Mr. Bishop, and Eve is kind of just on her own. Myrnin is kind of saying he's under Bishop, but he's not really, and Amile is basically nowhere to be found. So everyone's basically trying to figure out what to do. And the time period of Carpe Corpus compared to Lord of Misrule is several months. So after the events of Lord of Misrule, several months have passed since then, where Carpe Corpus begins, and it begins on Claire's 17th birthday, which is a huge milestone for her, because much of the series goes into how everyone treats her like a kid because she's so young and she's in this situation and she shouldn't be. And this point of 17 actually is a really big turning point for her character overall. It basically shows that, she no longer is a child. Like, with the turning of 17, she really is showing how much of an adult she is, because of all the things she's not only gone through already, but many of the things she goes through in this novel also contribute to the fact that this is no longer the same naive young girl that we had back in the first book. At book 6 in this series, we really see that Claire has made a lot of very important decisions that are very actually smart in a lot of ways, and are really amazing decisions that she had to make as an adult. And many of the chapters that were super long kind of contributed to that, where there were many points in each individual chapter Claire was having to make specific decisions that had direct outcomes. And it's really hard, I think, for a lot of writers to have a character make a decision and then cut a chapter off at some point within the resounding conflict that happens from that decision, unless like you end the chapter on like a bit of a cliffhanger and then pick it up in the next chapter kind of thing. So I understand why some of these chapters might have been a little longer, because there were definitely some points where I felt like it would have been difficult to maybe cut it off at a certain point for the next chapter. But overall, it was really, really good. The world building has definitely gotten a lot bigger because we understand actually a whole new side of Morganville in the story. We find out exactly how there are these portals that work within the town, how they work, and what essentially literally keeps the town running, which is a huge point that I remember having loved when I was first reading this in high school. It was a really big plot point that actually affected a lot of things in the future, and definitely affects a lot of different characters in the future. So if you're reading the series along with me, be prepared for within the next few books to have some major things happen that are going to change the course of how the story goes, because some characters are going to end up not in some very good places, basically. Overall, I really liked this one. I felt like it still wasn't, you know, the absolute best out of the best. I still think that Feast of Fools is probably my favorite so far out of the series, but Carpe Corpus is a very close second, because I felt like that there was so much growth within this one for Claire specifically that I truly felt I really enjoyed this book, because I was so excited to really just see her finally have a moment where she had some growth. And the growth was that she no longer is being seen as a kid, and which was one of the most annoying things for me, because I know what it's like to have everyone think of you that because you're so young, you're naive and stupid. So to see Claire finally get her moment where she's like, I'm proving to everyone I'm no longer a child and that I can handle this, it was a really sweet moment and a really awesome moment for me to be able to see again. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get to it today, because I do want to edit my coffee and ketchup video tonight and upload it maybe tonight or tomorrow. But if I don't, then tomorrow I'm going to be starting the next book, which is Fade Out. This is the last bind up I have of the Morganville vampires before I have the actual real standalone volume books, basically. This one contains Fade Out and Kiss of Death, which are books 7 and 8. And this is the synopsis that is given for Fade Out. Without Bishop ruling over the town of Morganville, life has changed dramatically. The resident vampires have made major concessions to the human population. With their newfound freedoms, Claire Danvers and her friends are almost starting to feel comfortable again. But when a filmmaker goes missing after starting work on a short documentary about vampires, Claire and her friends are feeling anything but safe. I remember the storyline. So essentially, from Feast of Fools to Carpe Corpus, we have the Bishop storyline. Now we move into the filmmaker storyline, which was really one of the cool things I liked about this series, because it kind of went into like this Ghost Hunters like kind of vibe. If you've ever watched that show, it's very similar to that. Essentially, what we find out at the end of Carpe Corpus is that, you know, with everything that's happened, and Bishop, obviously, like it says in the synopsis, no longer being a part of, you know, Morganville, things are changing. At the very end of Carpe Corpus, is about a month after all the final events of Bishop's rule having happened, things really start to change. There's a lot of changes in terms of how the humans are used within the society and their kind of role. Like, they actually seem to be getting a little bit more rights as opposed to the vampires ruling everything. And this is kind of like a continuation of that, is that once things though start to get kind of in a place where everyone's kind of comfortable, some kind of conflict comes in, which is this filmmaker. I am actually really excited for this, because this does go into then also another story of Michael and some of the things that he is planning on doing, because the next book I remember is where a big storyline for Michael happens, and is one of the things I remember loving the most too when I was first reading this series. I want to say the filmmaker story may only play into one book, but I feel like for some reason it does play into at least another book or two, like, or at least somebody's mentioned. I don't quite remember, but I know for a fact this is definitely Fade Out, maybe a little bit of Kiss of Death, but I'm not sure. Hey guys, so it is currently Thursday evening. I've just gotten back from work, and I haven't really had a chance to update you guys just because Monday and Tuesday I was not really in the mood to read at all. And then yesterday I only read a little bit, and then I had a friend come over for dinner, so we were kind of busy all night and I got a little tipsy, so I definitely was not able to really talk to you guys much. But I did start Fade Out yesterday. I got through like the first chapter, which is about 22 pages of the book so far. It's not really all that interesting yet so far because there really hasn't been a lot that's happened. This is essentially taking place, I want to say, like a couple months after the events of Lord of Misrule, because there's talk about how there's already a lot of construction that's gone on in the town, cleaning up after this big tornado that came through and all the destruction that Mr. Bishop and his cohorts had wreaked on the town. The most interesting thing is that Claire went to go see Mirnan, and they found a picture of this character, Ada, who was brought up in Lord of Misrule. And she's a very specific purpose within the story, but I can't really say anything without divulging it too much. But they find a picture of her from when she was alive, essentially, is all I will say. But they find a picture of her, and it brings up a lot of stuff about how Mirn's relationship was with her, and we find out a little bit more about who she is and exactly how she's connected to this whole thing. I do want to sit and watch The Mummy, honestly, today. Like, it's been kind of a crap day, and I just want to watch something that's going to make me happy. But I do want to get through some of this, so my goal is for tonight to get to at least page 100, which in this copy, that really equates to actually page 114. Because I don't like stopping in the middle of a chapter, and page 100 is in the middle of a chapter. So if I can get to page 114 today, which I think I saw was chapter 8. So if I can get to chapter 8 today, I'll be pretty happy. And then I might reward myself with that by watching my favorite movie, because I've had a bit of a crap day. Okay, so I've reached my goal for tonight, which was to get to chapter 8. Emilie apparently is going through some really rough things based on the death of a very close friend of hers, possible lover of hers for years at the end of Lord of Misrule, and so she's really dealing with that. And so there's a whole thing where Oliver is who is one of the other vampires, and he's kind of her second in command, is trying to take over Morganville, and he's trying to find a way to bring her down. On top of that, there's also some stuff dealing with Ada, who is a character, like I said, is brought up in Lord of Misrule, who doesn't really like Claire that much. She really has no good feelings towards her because essentially Ada is one of Mirnan's friends, and Ada thinks that Claire is trying to steal Mirnan away from her. The main plot of the story focuses on how there is this documentary that is being created about Morganville. And I originally thought that it was someone that was from out of town that was coming in to make it. But it turns out that actually in this book, it is a native of Morganville who is creating a documentary. She's basically like the town historian, if you will. And so she's actually like doing a whole Morganville documentary kind of thing. And this particular girl is not liked by Claire because Claire thinks that she is trying to steal away both her best friend Eve and her boyfriend Shane. So this is a lot of jealousy in this one, which I think is pretty fair. I mean, with the fact that Claire is a 17-year-old girl, up until this point, we haven't really seen any inkling of her being an actual teenager because there's been so many things that have gone on where she's had to act like an adult most times and have to fight for the fact that she is almost an adult in different situations. So now we get to kind of see her more childish side within this story, which is kind of interesting. It seems like there's a lot based on what I just said, but there's really not a lot that goes on. Like I said, the biggest plot of the story is about this documentary being made and everything. And I think really like that's kind of more of a subplot because I feel like really the big like overarching plot of the entire series at this point is now we're at a point where Emilie is faltering and Oliver's trying to take over. Like there's always like the plot of each individual story, and then there's kind of a more overarching plot that covers the whole series. And I feel like, you know, those are the two that we play into the most, is the power struggle with the vampires of who is running it, whether it's humans or vampires that are running the town, and then more individual kind of personal plots, I guess is what you would call it, which is about the documentary and Claire's jealousy. The writing style of everything from basically Feast of Fools to Carpe Corpus, books 4 through 6 I felt like were really the points where the writing style was solidified. Like Midnight Alley was kind of a go-between stage with the writing where it was getting better, but once we kind of hit the Bishop storyline and Feast of Fools and how it's ended at Carpe Corpus, The writing is so much better. This definitely feels much more older young adult. Like it's not at the young end of the spectrum for young adult anymore, where it'd be for like 14, 15-year-olds, but this is slowly becoming more 16, maybe 17-year-old YA. It's definitely not anywhere near like the older end of the spectrum, where I would think would be somewhere between 19, 20, which kind of crosses into new adult. This is a step up in a lot of ways from the very beginning of the story, which is very juvenile. And I feel like too, the characters themselves have honestly gotten better. Like Monica in this series was really annoying, and even in one of the Bishop stories, I want to say it might have been either Feast of Fools or Lord of Misrule, she was really childish, and I feel like she still is in a lot of ways because that's just part of her character, but I feel like for some reason she feels different in Fade Out than she does in the other books, which is kind of bizarre. But maybe that's because she has changed, and I am kind of recognizing that. I don't know, but I'm kind of okay with this being like a weird story where like there's not a lot that's happening because there was so much that happened in the last 3 books. But I'm excited to see kind of where this documentary goes, because now that I realize that it wasn't someone that was out of town doing it, and it's someone in town doing it, now I don't really remember much of what happened as a consequence of the documentary. Also, there is another storyline that I almost forgot to mention, and that is the fact that Michael, in this book in particular, has been reached out by a executive from a music recording company, because in the beginning of the story, Michael holds a really big concert in town, and somebody that goes to the college that is in Morganville, they end up bringing their dad out, who's a recording executive, and is like, Michael, I want you to come out to Dallas and, record a demo CD, and I want to show it to the people I work with, and I really think you're going to go places. I feel like Kiss of Death goes into that a little bit more, like that's more of a plot as Kiss of Death, because I know that there was at least one book where that was heavily focused on, was Michael going out and actually doing something outside of Morganville kind of thing, and I think the gang goes with him. Like I don't think it's just him that goes, so I think I'm right in that sense, where it might be the next book that goes into it, because I only remember it really being one book, but it is first mentioned in Fade Out as being like an actual thing. Like Michael is getting the notoriety that he's wanted for years, and he's, kind of moving up in the world, but there are complications with that. Fade Out at this moment is like a 3-star. It's, it's great. It's a great kind of medium point within the story where there's not a lot that goes on, but it's a good transition from from the aftermath of the last book to some other kind of plot that is evolving in the story, and it is going into a really interesting overarching storyline of the fact that there is a lot of power being displaced, but with the vampires specifically. So it's not awful by any means. There's just not really a lot that seems to be happening at the moment, but it's kind of on the higher end of a 3-star. Like it's maybe like a 3.5, maybe a 3.75, but I can probably guarantee that by the time I get to the end of this book, it'll probably get to be a 4-star, because I've been finding that the stories that kind of seem to be a little slower in this series, or they don't seem to have a lot happen, end up surprising me a lot in the end, which is what I like. Because since this is a reread series of a series I have now read since I was in high school, it's good that I'm getting re-surprised by all of these things, because they're good surprises. They're things I'm realizing I'm remembering, and things that I forgot, I can pick up on it again a lot quicker and be like, oh, I remember with that now. I remember that was something that happened. I think I'm gonna go sit and watch my movie, because like I said, I had a bit of a crap day today, and I really just wanted to sit and relax for a little while. And I think Robert's gonna be getting up here pretty soon anyway to make dinner. So my guess is that based on what I think of this so far, and the fact that I flew through the first 100 pages of this really, really quickly, probably within like the last hour and a half or so, I feel like I'm going to be able to finish this tomorrow after I get home from work, because I only have a little more than 100 pages left of it. And then I think I might either start Kiss of Death after that. It depends on how I'm feeling about it. But usually I like to take the rest of the day to like simmer on it, and then pick up the next book maybe the next day. But I don't know, we'll see. But Either way, I will be working through Kiss of Death at some point during the day Saturday, whether that's reading a chunk of it or reading all of it. I'm not quite sure because it's not that long, but I don't know exactly what my Saturday is going to entail, like what time I'm going to get up. I am going to be having friends come over again Saturday, because one of my best friends from college, I reconnected with her this past last weekend, and her boyfriend is coming out down to visit, and so they're coming over for dinner Saturday. And so I don't know exactly like what's going to happen with all that, but I would like to try to at least get through some of Kiss of Death on Saturday if I can. And if I don't finish it on Saturday, I will be able to finish it Sunday, which will be really nice because then it'll round out the vlog pretty well, where I think you guys will have seen me finish technically 3 books since I finished up Carpe Corpus on last Sunday. So that'll be really nice. 3 books in pretty much a week actually is really, really good. That's the first time that'll have happened in a long time. And then after Kiss of Death will be the next book, which was my November read, which is Ghost Town, which I'm really excited about. So I am getting really close then to getting completely caught up on this series, and that makes me so excited. Hey guys, so it is Sunday night. It is about 8 o'clock almost right now, and I just sat and finished Kiss of Death, which is book 8 in the Morganville Vampire series. So I feel like I've reached the point where with Fade Out and Kiss of Death, I feel like the series has extensively gotten so much better because there's so much more to the story that's going on. And I feel like, especially with Kiss of Death, there's a lot more that is expanding on the world and some of the lore, and I feel like Kiss of Death just had so much more going for it. Like, I was a little like back and forth with Fade Out because it seemed to be kind of one of those filler stories where I wasn't sure whether or not there was really a lot going on with it, and I didn't know if truly, it was worth a 5-star rating. But I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars because I really liked a lot of what was going for it, despite it feeling like one of those kind of more filler stories. And Kiss of Death is actually more or less like an actual plot part of the story. Like, there's a whole aspect of Kiss of Death that brings in this entire idea that actually goes further on. Like, it's mentioned more like in the later books, and there's certain people that come up later on in the series that are essentially people that were met in Kiss of Death. So to kind of give an idea of what this one was about, so in Fade Out, there is a recording executive that approaches Michael at one of his shows in Morganville and tells him that he would like for Michael to come out to Dallas, Texas to record a demo CD and maybe do a few shows out in Dallas. And essentially Kiss of Death, that is what is happening, is that Michael, Shane, Eve, and Claire all get to go out to Dallas, Texas to experience this with Michael. And they get to actually be out of Morganville for the first time. Claire for the first time since she moved to Morganville for school. Eve for the first time in her entire life. Michael for the first time in his entire life, but Shane has actually been out of town before. He was out of town for about 2 years and then came back, which is revealed much earlier on in the series when Frank Collins shows up in the Dead Girls Dance. With this though, there are some complications because considering that no one is really supposed to leave Morganville, especially the vampires, it's very difficult for them to get out of the town with permission, but they do get the permission. But even with that, there are some really crazy things that end up happening. Shane, Claire, Michael, and Eve all get attacked by several different people in the small town that is outside of Morganville that seems to be for completely no reason. They're just, they're outsiders, so this town doesn't really seem to like them. But then they also found out that there are actually other vampires living outside of Morganville, and they don't know necessarily why, which then leads into a town called Black, where essentially the town was ravaged by newly formed vampires, and they've been killing and turning vampires left and right within the town itself, and they're all sick with the same sickness that the vampires in Morganville had that Claire had helped cure. So there's a lot that goes on with that, and it reveals something about some of the things that happened prior to Bishop's arrival in Morganville. And so there's a little bit more lore building within this world because now we know that there are actually more vampires out there than there originally were. Morganville is like the only town where any vampire that is still alive is supposed to be. And now we find out that there's a whole other town of vampires that are, sick and they need help. And so there begins this kind of, idea of the fact that there's more of these things out there. And it kind of brings in this feeling of like, even if you go outside of the most unsafe place, you're still never completely safe. And that's kind of terrifying for me as a reader because I just want my quartet to be nice and safe and, have happy things happen, but that's not the case, unfortunately. So as far as this one, again, I feel like, especially with a lot of the later books, like after book 4, the writing of the stories get actually a lot better, but I think that it's with Fade Out where they get to be pretty much to the level of what I remember, because I remember them having been, a little bit more juvenile towards the beginning, but I felt like the books 4, 5, and 6 were kind of, pretty good, still a little on the mediocre side here and there. But with Fade Out and Kiss of Death, I feel like there's been a lot of improvement. Like they're still incredibly short, but I feel like the length of it no longer matters at this point because the writing is actually really good and I think fits more of the, actual tone of the story. And so the page length of the stories themselves don't necessarily matter to me as much as they did when I first started rereading the series, because I felt like with, for instance, The Dead Girls Dance and Glass Houses, the first 2 books, that the writing was so very juvenile and it made things go really, really quickly. And I felt like the book lengths were not really that, indicative of what the real story is supposed to be. I felt like that was kind of way too short for what the story I remember had been. And then going into Feast of Fools and Lord of Misrule and Carpe Corpus, the page lengths were actually more indicative of what I remember having been part of the story. And I felt like the writing had definitely gotten better to show that the page length actually was pretty consistent with where the story was going, and I felt like the page length was appropriate for the stories. And I feel like now with Fade Out and Kiss of Death, the page lengths are more than adequate for what these stories are, because they are shorter, but I feel like for what you get with both of these books in general, it's so much more compact and there's so much more that happens than I think than meets the eye. And I feel like that's really been something that's kind of just grown with Rachel Cain's continuous writing of the series. And it makes me really sad that I can't read a lot of the like spin-offs or short stories and novellas that are a part of this series, because I would like to see what those different pieces of the story were like in terms of their writing and if they were actually really good, and if the short stories actually are sufficient material, and if the length of them matches the writing style too. Like, it's really weird. I feel like with Rachel Cain, she's the only author I've met with this series in particular that the writing style affects how I feel about the page count, and I don't think I've really found that with a lot of other authors. So that's a very interesting development for me. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars because I think that this is probably one of my more favorites. I feel like Fade Out's a pretty close second though, because although it was more of a filler story, I felt like it truly just felt different. And it fit more of what I remember the series had been when I was in high school. And I feel like Kiss of Death has exceeded that. Like, if there was a level of 5 stars, this would be closer to maybe a 6 star if I could have given it that. Because I feel like Kiss of Death just explores so much more of what's going on out in the outside world. And I feel like just in general, this is so far the favorite. So that's going to basically do it for me this week. So yeah, I got through 3 books of the series, which is really good. And now I am on to my November pick, which is Ghost Town. This is book 9, and this one is, I think it kind of goes back to some of the things that we experienced in Kiss of Death, but I think there's something else that kind of happens within this, but I'll read the synopsis to you guys real quick. Despite their obvious differences, the human and vampire residents of Morganville have learned to coexist, but that doesn't stop genius student Claire Danvers from keeping up her guard. While developing a new system to maintain the town's defenses, Claire discovers a way to use the vampire's powers to help keep outsiders from spreading news of Morganville's unique situation once they've crossed the city limits. But the new system has an unexpected and possibly deadly consequence. People inside the town start forgetting who and what they are, even the vampires. And when Claire's boyfriend Shane and her best friend Eve start treating her like a perfect stranger, Claire realizes she has to figure out a way to pull the plug on her experiment before she figures out how to save herself and Morganville. This I do not remember. I do not remember this actually having been a part of the plot of the story, but it actually works out really well considering that there is this whole part of the story that has to be divulged, where essentially in Fade Out, there's a point where the actual essence that runs the town of Morganville dies, and in Kiss of Death it's mentioned briefly where there needs to be something done about it, but because of Michael's ability to go out to Dallas and the fact that the founder would prefer Michael to go with his group of friends so that they all stay together and that they're held accountable, that kind of gets put to the wayside. So I'm excited to see that actually it gets picked up in this one, because there is a lot that needs to be figured out. They need to figure out how to bring something to power the city, because there's a lot of things that happen in the town in regards to keeping it safe and isolated and secret from the rest of the world. Like, the town limits essentially are set up where if people leave the town, they don't remember anything about Morganville other than that they lived there, but they don't remember anything about the vampires. And if they start to remember, bad things happen. And it's a part of actually Shane's backstory is something happened to his family while they were gone for 2 years, and it greatly affected how Shane views the vampires and how he views Morganville. So the fact that, though, too, that whatever Claire has picked to do for this, to try out, is actually affecting the way that her friends and her boyfriend are, you know, remembering her. I'm excited to see what she does in terms of like what is the actual experiment that is being done to like test out this new system and how exactly it affects these people, other than obviously making them lose their memories and stuff like that. But I want to know whether it's like something that is cloaking everything in their minds, or if it's like actually making them sick, like how the vampires were at the very beginning of the story. I feel like it's going to end up actually getting to be really, really good, because there's definitely now some interesting science-based things that I would be interested in learning, because there's a lot of talk about like alchemical stuff and a lot of like physics and very science fiction-y things that happen in this series that I don't think ever really get explored a whole heck of a lot, because there's never been a real chance for anything to develop, because a lot of the story's been basically Claire having to fight for her life against different kinds of events that happen involving vampires, and all of her science stuff gets put to the wayside. So I'm excited to see that now we actually get a chance to see how some of that stuff works and the consequences of some of the things that she ends up trying to develop. So I guess with that being said, this is going to be my last catch-up vlog for the Morganville vampires, because now that I'm actually at my November read, I kind of want to do a separate actual like full-on review of this one like I did for the very first one, now that I've actually gone through all the other books that, you know, I wanted to read in the series. And I feel like I've given a pretty good quick review of everything I've read at this point and what I've thought about them, but you guys can always check out like the ratings I give in these videos in the description, because that way it kind of gives you a good idea of what I thought of everything. For the most part, I feel like the series at this point has done really well. Nothing's been like lower than a 3-star, but I would definitely say that at this point, Kiss of Death is the favorite of the series. But now that I'm getting into the longer books, that might change. If you would like, though, to see any vlogs, you know, going forward with other reread series, I may do one. I'm going to do one, I think, for the Winter Quest. I think I might do one for my other random TBRs as I go through them to catch myself back up. I'm not sure. But if you would like to see like a vlog particularly for those books, catching myself up to December, let me know and in the comments below, and I will definitely think about doing it. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me. If you guys did enjoy this vlog, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit the button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.